Last year, the Columbus Blue Jackets had a shocking push for a playoff spot. But will regression in 2025 be the story for the Columbus Blue Jackets? This is the 2025-26 deep dive on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Hello and welcome to my 22nd team on my 2025-2026 preseason power rankings, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who, as I said in the intro, had a incredibly shocking push for a playoff spot that ended up just short of getting in. And a lot of that was they were such a fun story because of how easy they were to root for last year. Obviously, with the tragedy with Johnny Gaudreau, this team became a universally loved team, and I think even Canadians fans who were battling with them for that final spot wouldn't have been extremely disappointed if Columbus would have got in over Montreal just based on everything that was surrounding this team. But going into this season, it's interesting because there wasn't a lot of movement for the Blue Jackets, right? There was some additions on the edge of this roster, and then obviously the one big re-signing, which we'll talk about in a second. But you really didn't have a ton of needle-moving moves here, and you're really hoping that the youth development continues here, and we kind of see that next wave of Blue Jackets come up with this prospect pool that's been fairly hyped up over the last couple years, and we've seen a couple of those players make impacts already, and we saw a couple of them make impacts last year, but I think they're really expecting to see a big jump from the prospects, and that's what this team is going to be relying on in terms of boosts, in terms of what's going to elevate this team to that next level. And I mentioned regression being a big factor here, and I definitely think that that could be a factor, because I don't think this team has some red flags that we need to talk about, and some things that are just kind of questionable in terms of where this team is going to look in terms of this season. Obviously, they go out and they add a bunch of bottom six forwards who we'll talk about in a second, and then the Ivan Provorov contract, which was a monstrous deal for a player who it seemed was ready to leave and was ready to kind of move on and find a new spot. And Columbus just kind of said, "What's the number that's gonna let you stay?" He threw out a crazy number, and Columbus matched it. And I didn't love it at the time. I don't love it now, but the reality is that that's the deal that they have now. That's the deal that was signed, and they're gonna have to navigate around that moving forward. And I think that's a good transition now into kind of the overview of this team. And offensively, the offense doesn't wow me. I think they have a couple players that are intriguing, but especially for an offense that was number one in goals for, there really isn't a lot here that wows me, and it really was a heavy PDO season, and it seems like this team is primed for regression, like truly primed for regression. And we'll dive through the roster a little bit to kind of highlight that a little bit. The 21st in defense, I actually like this blue line a decent amount. I think that the blue line definitely has some opportunity for growth depending on how some players are played, but they do still have a couple anchors on that blue line behind some of the guys that I really like. The biggest question for me is in net, and Jet Greaves has shown flashes of looking really, really good, but they've just been in an incredibly small sample size. And Elvis Merzlikins, I think the runway on him being a starting goal in the NHL has kind of ran out. 30th in special teams, it's not a great unit. Going forward, a lot of it has to do with the players on it. Again, I think that there's a lot of regression that could happen there, both on the power play and penalty kill. But I do like their management team. I have them at 16th in terms of coaching culture. I don't think that it's bad. I think that the offseason outlook for this team is that they will still kind of be battling for, hopefully a playoff spot. But I have more doubts about that than I have even for a couple of teams below them here in terms of potential offseason outlook. But I mean, you look at the coaching culture, and Don Waddell has done a good enough job in terms of getting this team kind of to where they are now. I hate the Ivan Provorov contract. I love some of the other moves that he's made. I didn't love the Coyle and Miles Wood addition that he made. But there's some other moves that I think have been fine. I think it's B minus. He also gets that B minus in part because of the time in Carolina. He hasn't had a ton of runway in Columbus here, only being here for a season, so it's tough. I haven't loved as much of what he's done in Columbus as much as I did in Carolina, but it's still too early to tell, and that job is so fresh that I kind of am leaning on that a little bit. Dean Evason, again, he was fine. I think a lot of the success of the Blue Jackets last year was based on, the team rallying around the Johnny Gaudreau tragedy, and I really don't want to use that as the narrative push here, but it's not the first time we've seen teams been able to do that, and I think if you ask the players, that was a big rallying cry for them, and I don't think you can you can't rely on that forever, and I don't know if Dean Evason is like he's fine, right? Like I'm a C+. That's above the base level of what I think a coach should be. But again, I haven't seen anything out of him that really shocks me and gets me out of my seat. In terms of the season outlook, I think playoff hopeful is fair. This is a team that almost made the playoffs last year, even with the regression. I think that there's some positive progression that could happen. With some of their young players that could kind of offset that slightly. So in terms of that, I'll still give them the playoff hopeful tier. As we dive kind of into their numbers last year, the defense was bad, and the defense didn't do anything to get better, right? The goaltending is still the same. The blue line is basically still the same. 24th in goals against, 28th in expected goals against. Not great. Their actual goal share was 9th. Their expected goal share was 26th. That is the number that really jumps out to me here, is that this team was so their offensive output was so far ahead of where they were expected to be, and even their expected goals for being 17th. Evolving Hockey has them a little bit higher than that. So even if you say 15, 16, the fact that they're number one really jumps out as like this desperate area for regression, right? And you look at their goal share being 8th and their expected goal share being 26th. That is a massive disparity in where this team should have been. Power play was 21st, penalty kill was 21. Even then, I think a lot of that, there was some outliers in terms of, goals for potential there and potentially goals against. I mean, the finishing is second, obviously. That was a big part of this team too, is just how elite they were at finishing. And the thing is, though, is a lot of their players haven't proven that they can outscore their expected goals numbers consistently enough for me to believe that that's sustainable, right? Like there's teams like the Capitals, for instance, like during the prime of actually an era that would just consistently outscore their expected goals. So you just kind of like expected it, right? It became the norm, right? It became their default, and I don't see that as much here in Columbus. Now, is it possible? Yeah, but I haven't seen enough to be able to bet on that. So looking at this forward core, the standout player is obviously Kirill Marchenko, who had a phenomenal season last year. Like truly turned into a top line winger, somebody with a ton of potential, and really looks like the backbone of what this offense is going to be for the next number of years. But you also had some good supporting cast. I mean, Sean Monahan had an incredibly impressive season. My concern about Monahan is it seems like somebody who's primed for a regression season, right? It's somebody who was putting up numbers that were uncharacteristically elite for him. It seems like a guy who could definitely take a step back. In terms of some other guys, I mean, Vorokinov is just an pure offensive player with zero defense. I think that he could continue to grow as an offensive player. I don't know if that defense improves, so I don't know how high his ceiling is in terms of value. But then you look at a lot of the other guys on this team. Obviously, Shinnikov is he requested a trade. As of now, he's still on the Blue Jackets, so he's still on the roster. But we'll talk about him later as a potential trade piece for this team. They bring in Miles Wood, they bring in Charlie Coyle, they bring in Isaac Lundestrom. You got all that. Matthew Oliver, obviously, on that really long contract extension. Cole Sillinger and Kent Johnson are fine. Adam Fantilli is kind of the question mark here. He hasn't shown a ton in terms of elite top 6 upside, but he's still extremely young, and I'm not really worried about it yet. But he's definitely somebody to kind of keep an eye on in terms of what his ceiling is as a player on this team. But as I mentioned, Kirill Marchenko is the true centerpiece. You look at Marchenko's offensive numbers, and his output last year was phenomenal. He was one of the best players in terms of generating quality chances. He really drove the offense for the Blue Jackets as a whole, and was the primary reason for this team, the team's offensive success. And you talk about regression candidates and players that could potentially like the drop off that I expect from some of the players on this team. Marchenko is one of the players that I think could kind of offset that, and I do think that he could be somebody who takes another step this season. He's somebody that I definitely could think could easily become a point a game consistent winger, somebody who becomes kind of a true centerpiece on a team like this. And he really proved that last year. I mean, his defense was solid enough for what he was bringing offensively. The one area that I have concern in is in terms of the power play numbers. They really didn't stand out at all last year in terms of his ability to create chances and things like that. So I hope that develops, and I think that that's easier to develop than the play driving offensive production. And he was extremely elite at that, both in his expected numbers and his actual in finishing in terms of results. So Kirill Marchenko's a true star. He really looks like somebody who's going to break out, and I think by nature of him being stuck in Columbus and in a small market that people don't really talk about, he doesn't get a ton of attention. I think if the Blue Jackets would have grabbed that last playoff spot, this is somebody who would have got a ton of looks in terms of what people think of him and their opinion of him as a player, because he would have got that national spotlight that you just can't get if you don't make the playoffs and you play in a small market team. So Marchenko is absolutely a star and somebody to really keep an eye on this season as a quote unquote breakout candidate that people are gonna is gonna become a general household name in terms of his impact on the game. Whereas obviously Blue Jackets fans and hardcore hockey fans know just how good he is based on this last season, but he's somebody that I think could easily become more of a household name than he already is. Sean Monahan is the quintessential potential regression candidate here. Now, his even strength offensive numbers in terms of of chance creation actually weren't bad last season. So in terms of how that looks compared to his finishing, you might not necessarily think that it's regression. It's just more this steep spike that he had in that potential. I think that last year really was the coming together of the emotions and being there and having to be kind of that first line center, getting that role. But going into his age 31 season, it's hard for me to think Sean Monahan can replicate that. Do I think it's possible? Yeah, because I think his underlying numbers actually were pretty solid last season. It's more just a concern that eventually he's gonna hit that wall and get kind of that that downward trajectory that we kind of expect from most players. Getting into Monahan's age, and it's hard for me to say that a guy who's never really been a top line center is suddenly going to become one, year over year at 31 years old. That's just not something that we've typically seen. And again, I think that really leans a lot into what things are going to look like for Adam Fantilli. And the underlying numbers for Fantilli have not been good, right? He's done a lot of things. We really haven't seen a ton of offensive progression from Fantilli through his time in Columbus yet. Now, I'm not saying that he's a bust. I'm not saying that you should write off, you should sell your Fantilli stock, because he's still extremely young and has a ton of time to grow and isn't really rushed into it right now. Columbus is ahead of schedule from where they expected to be. But in terms of what Columbus wants to be even this year, obviously they we're almost a playoff team last year. You expect with a younger team that you can, progress on that, and you can, get even closer to pushing for a playoff spot or getting into the playoffs. And Adam Fantilli really needs to be a big piece of that, right? Like, he truly needs to become that, that top 6 center. I think he honestly needs to become a first-line center, because I think Monahan being your 2C is a lot more comfortable position for me. I still don't love it, but it's better than Monahan is your 1C and then Fantilli is your 2C. But it really is, like, this is going to have to be an important year for Adam Fantilli in terms of, what it looks like from a progression standpoint, especially if Columbus wants to contend for the playoffs. But as of now, like, the play tracking hasn't been great. He hasn't really found a significant way to generate offense yet. He can set up one-timers really well, but other than that, there isn't a ton of a ton of hope here. His rush offense is definitely his strength, but even that's not, it's not anything special. His zone entries are good, and that kind of, contributes to the rush offense. His carryouts, his retrievals aren't terrible, and I think that's kind of where you get, the most value from him here is on the defensive end. But in terms of, puck retrievals and stuff like that, but the offense really needs to take a step, and if he can do that, then the potential first line center draft grade on him can definitely come into fruition. But as we get further and further in his career, it's harder and harder for that to happen. Again, I'm not saying he's a bust. I still really like Adam Fantilli, but it's just something to watch for, right? If it's another season like this, there's going to start to be some questions, but I'm not there yet, obviously. But I'm just, this is a big year in terms of what we can see from Adam Fantilli. You have Voronkov, who, as I said in the beginning, is just your pure offensive player, right? This is somebody who, again, doesn't generate a ton of chances, but he can score, right? Like, this is your pure, scoring, all offense winger, and I don't know what the ceiling's going to be on that in terms of, the value he can bring in that sense. But I do have a lot of hope that the scoring is going to continue, and he's going to continue to develop into this great top 6 kind of scoring winger. I don't, obviously the defense is horrid, and anybody who watched him this year will attest to that. But if he can continue to be a great contributor offensively, then you can kind of offset that, especially if you play him with more defensive players. It's pretty easy to shelter a player like that if you have defensively responsible centers. But I really like Voronkov. I think that he can be a sneaky secondary scoring option for a team like this, especially because Marchenko is going to be taking the primary load of that. And if Adam Fantilli can take a step up offensively too, that'll definitely take some of the weight off what Voronkov needs to do, and that'll make things easier for the whole team. Boone Jenner is an interesting player. I've always liked Boone Jenner for what he is. He's nothing special. He's a middle 6 forward who puts up pretty decent offensive numbers. Doesn't play a ton of defense. He's fine, and he's an okay third line player for a team like Columbus. I think that he's going to get an opportunity in the top 6. I don't love that, but in terms of what he can bring as a depth option, he's fine. He's good in the locker room. That's something that has been hyped on a lot, obviously. But going into his age 33 season, which feels insane because it feels like he's been around forever. This is another player that regression is going to start to really hit, and we've already seen it in some of his numbers. Even last year, but it's only going to continue to drop down. I don't see him taking a huge bounce back. But his offensive contributions are still going to be fine for a third line forward. The defense isn't going to be great. I think that there's still value here. His power play numbers are fine. They're slightly above league average. I I have concerns if he's going to play in the top 6 more than not. Um, but in terms of being a bottom 6 option, like there's worse guys you could have there, and obviously he's great in the room and that and all that matters in terms of team chemistry and stuff like that. So if he can find a good role as a third line winger, then there's value there for the Blue Jackets. And I think it's a bottom 6 that I think is actually like looks better than it did last year. Although I don't think the top 6 really got any better. He'll be able to help out in terms of what he can do to stabilize bottom 6. That's going to be fine. It's going to be a scrappy bottom 6, and Boone Jenner will definitely add to that in terms of what he can bring with value. Charlie Coyle is one of the players they brought in, and Charlie Coyle is such a fascinating player because he does really, really good in terms of his retrievals. Like his zone exits are solid. He's able to retrieve the puck really well. But this is another player here that has a ton of successful exits, but also a ton of failed exits. I think his ability to get the puck out of the zone, win battles and get the puck out of the zone, is going to be very helpful, especially with some of the weaknesses on Columbus as a team, and we'll talk about the blue line a little bit in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. But in terms of what he can bring to the Blue Jackets in that sense, it'll be pretty helpful. I don't love them going to get Coyle and Wood. They gave up quite a bit to take on some salary from Colorado just kind of for free. I struggle to see kind of the long-term vision here. Now, I think Charlie Coyle on his own is a fine third-line center. I don't see a problem with that with what Columbus has. It's more the Miles Wood acquisition we'll talk about in a second. You're not going to get any dynamic offense out of Charlie Coyle. He's more there to be kind of that retrieval, defensive kind of guy who can eat those minutes from your players like Fantilli and Monahan, more so Fantilli, but definitely Sean Monahan as well. And that's where they're going to get value out of Charlie Coyle. I don't know if there's any other significant value that he's going to bring, and in that sense, like it's fine. I don't see a ton of upside in terms of what he can contribute offensively at this point, but the retrievals are going to be helpful. His ability to take a lot of those defensive minutes from those top 6 guys is also going to be helpful from a roster construction standpoint. But I also don't think Charlie Coyle is like a needle mover on this team, and he was definitely the quote unquote biggest ad that they made, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to push him into a playoff spot, especially with some of the teams that missed the playoffs last year who also got better. Miles Wood's another addition they made, and I'm a lot less high on Miles Wood. His offensive generation is actually not bad, but he can't finish, and he's never really been able to finish. And his defensive numbers are awful, and those two things combined. He's also not played against insanely steep competition. So all those things combined, he's a fine playmaker, but he doesn't really bring anything else, and I don't think that that's enough to justify bringing in a guy who has 4 years left at $2.5 million. I really don't. I don't see the benefit in this deal, and especially somebody who does have his playmaking prowess not working in Colorado tells me a lot about how effective I think he's going to be in Columbus. Now, in saying that, as we talked about, with guys like Voronkov, maybe Miles Wood finds a spot playing with a guy like that and can kind of just be his setup guy. Maybe there's value there, but then you have 2 absolute defensive liabilities on one line, and that seems like a recipe for disaster. So it's a real head scratcher why Miles Wood was the guy they wanted, especially with the cap. Not so much the cap, but the contract length. Like, you're committing yourself a lot to a player who really doesn't strike me as somebody who brings a ton of value to this team, aside from the playmaking, and even the playmaking isn't great. It's just kind of okay. That is intriguing. Like, I'm curious to see how Miles Wood's going to be used in this offense. I don't love the ad at all. But I'm intrigued to see how he's used, because maybe they know something that I don't. which is quite possible. But in terms of his overall value, I really don't see a ton for the Blue Jackets aside from the above average playmaking. Isaac Lundstrom's a player that he's actually kind of been one of my guys. Like I've been pretty high on the development of Isaac Lundstrom, and you're not getting anything offensively from him, right? Like he's a pure low event kind of player. His only real value at this point is his retrieval ability, and even that it's not great, but like for a fourth liner you're paying nothing to. He's actually a pretty okay like defensive option. I think him and Coyle being able to eat those defensive minutes is going to be helpful to Columbus because they're going to be able to get the puck out quick and get it up to the offense, which is where this team shined last year. And the more opportunities you can give the offense to continue to shine, the better things are going to be. So it's fine as a bottom of the lineup ad. I like Isaac Lundstrom. He's somebody that I've been high on for a while. I made a post about him years ago. I think it was after his rookie season. It's still up on my page. Go check it out. NBA Hockey on Instagram. Link in the description. So Isaac Lundstrom's fun in that sense, but like you're not getting anything offensively from him. You're not really getting a ton of even entry potential from him. He's very much just going to be a zone exit player who's going to help in that sense and just get the puck up and out of the defensive zone, which is it's a positive trait, but it's not something that is worth any more than he was paid. But in terms of the contract and everything, it's a solid ad. I don't hate the ad for Columbus. I think he'll be a fine fourth line center for him. Finally, let's talk about Chinakhov because he's on the trade block, and he's a really intriguing trade option here, right? Like he had a real big breakout season in 23-24. He took a bit of a step down last year, but his offensive play driving actually improved quite a bit last season. But other than that, his defense dropped down a bit. His power play numbers aren't very good. His finishing dropped a little bit. His overall value dropped a bit. But again, this is a player who, if you're looking for a second liner who can play you can play competent defense and finish at a pretty high clip despite some regression last season, I'd take a flyer on it. I don't know how much I'd be willing to give up for Chinakhov. I feel like his value around the league is higher than it should be at the moment because he is a 23-year-old going into his age 24 season winger who's on a team that people didn't really look at, and he put up some decent scoring numbers last year, so that's always fun to teams who don't scout as much as they probably should. I think if Columbus is going to move, like Columbus needs to move him. Obviously, he requested a trade. I think that they're going to do well on a return. I don't think it's going to be like an underwhelming return. I don't think it's going to be like the JJ Peterka return, which was incredibly underwhelming. I think that they're going to be pretty happy overall with what they can get for him in terms of value in that sense. So for me, like as a trade chip, I think he's actually more valuable to this team than he is on the roster, despite being a decent young player. I don't think that his ceiling is extremely high, and I think teams are going to give up a lot because of like the possible product. Now, if he didn't have a bit of a drop off last year compared to the year before, I'd be a bit higher on him as a player. I still think he's fine as like a middle six, secondary scoring option who can play competent defense, but I don't know if he has extreme top six, high end elite scorer potential that some teams might think he does. So he's an intriguing player. I do think that he's worth a lot more to the Blue Jackets as a trade asset right now because teams around the league seem to think that his value is pretty high. So, in fact, they haven't moved him yet. Tells me that they're either getting no offers, which I think is unlikely, or they're getting a ton, and they're trying to sift through it and make something happen. This blue line is interesting to me because obviously you have Zach Werenski, who is one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, one of the best defensemen period in the league, and really showed that last year. He took a massive step forward in terms of like general public love. I've been a Zach Werenski fan for a while. I was a Zach Werenski was the reason Seth Jones looks so good guy. Even back in those days, and people laughed at me. But here we are. Zach Werenski is obviously the anchor of this blue line and is the centerpiece of this unit, and will be for some time. But around him, like I think there's interesting players here. Like Dante Fabro, somebody who I really like. I think is super underrated and was a great pickup for this team. Denton Matejchuk, if you know me. You know how much I love Denton Matejchuk, and there's not really a ton to talk about because he didn't play as a full-time player last year, but when he did, he showed flashes of being this extremely dynamic, offensive creator like he was in junior, and I have no doubt that he'll continue to take a step forward in that sense. David Severson's another guy who I really like, and I think it's super underrated. But then you have Ivan Provorov and Erik Gudbranson. Now, Ivan Provorov is less of an anchor than Erik Gudbranson is, obviously, but Ivan Provorov is paid like a borderline top pair defenseman, and aside from playing a lot of minutes, he doesn't do a ton of things that I love. So there's that, right? Like, I think Ivan Provorov's getting treated a lot like Seth Jones was when he was in Columbus, where he's just this minute muncher, but isn't super effective in those minutes, and that doesn't really add value to the team. It doesn't really get you, to that next level. And sure, it's great that he can, eat minutes from young players, but if you're not being effective, then you're really not adding any value to the team in those minutes. And that's ultimately the difference between, great high-end teams who can, find guys who can play a ton and be super effective, and teams that are, middling, that just want bodies who can play, 25 minutes a night. We jump into Zach Werenski, and I mean, like, what is there to say? He is, like I said, one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. There's a good case that I could have had him as an A+, even strength offense player. I think that might be a little bit much, but he's definitely like an edge case in that sense. I mean, one of the best goal-scoring defensemen in the league, one of the best chance-creating defensemen in the league, takes a ton of shots, high primary assist guy, creates a ton of chances on his passes. You're looking at somebody here who just, he's great in exits, great in entries, has a very high success rate in terms of, zone exits. His entry denials are very good, although his other defensive metrics aren't great. His entry denials are, and I think that's, one of the key things I look for in defensemen is if you can stop entries, then the rest of it doesn't really matter. He's one of the best defensemen in that sense. His defensive zone retrievals are pretty high. He has a ton of success when he goes in those situations. His rush offense is great. There isn't really a lot of bad things to say about Zach Werenski. Now, his defense is fine. There isn't anything, super standout about it besides, the entry denials. But in terms of his positioning and stuff defensively, like, he's okay. There's nothing really flashy about it. But in terms of, what he can be for this team as an offensive creator, like, he's one of the best defensemen in the league at it, and he's going to continue to be as long as he can stay healthy. That's kind of the biggest thing, right? If Zach Werenski's playing, that's great, but he just needs to be healthy, and he'll continue to be one of the best defensemen in the league. I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about him. I love Zach Werenski. He's awesome. I've been a Zach Werenski fan for a very long time, and I will continue to be until he proves to me that I shouldn't be a fan of him. And he's been great, and I really think that, fully healthy Werenski this season could easily push to be a North candidate, especially if the Blue Jackets can push into a playoff spot. David Severson's another guy I like, and I think David Severson's extremely underrated. His special teams, his penalty kill numbers are pretty good. His even strength offensive numbers are very good. He drives play really well. He creates a ton of opportunities for himself. He finishes a lot of those opportunities. His defensive metrics are better than he gets credit for. His power play numbers aren't very good, but in terms of somebody who's a second pair defenseman, I really like David Severson. I think he was great in New Jersey. I was a big fan of him in New Jersey. I've been a big fan of him in Columbus as well. Now he is going to his age 32 season, so there could be regression in that sense too, and it's kind of the name of the game here with the Columbus Blue Jackets. But Severson hasn't shown me any reason why I shouldn't believe that he can continue to be a second pair defenseman who is very effective, and again, until he proves me otherwise, that's kind of gonna be my thought process on him. As super effective second pair guy who can generate quite a bit of offense. Is fine defensively and is a very good penalty killer. And hey, I mean, people around the league seem to value Ivan Provorov more than him for some reason. I don't get it. But David Severson's been awesome, and I think he should be used significantly more than he was last year, especially more than Provorov. Like, please. Dane Matejchuk, as I said, kind of in my defensive intro, incredibly gifted with the puck. Like, one of the most talented defensemen with possession in the league, period. End of story. Like, he is phenomenal with the puck. His defensive metrics actually last year weren't bad. Now, he only played 45 games, so we'll see. And even he played a limited-ish role in a lot of those games. But if Denton Matejchuk can become a full-time, pure offensive, like, high-end offensive creator, like, the sky's the limit for his value on this team. Like, I think you could be looking. Now, I don't think he gets to an Erik Karlsson prime, Erik Karlsson level, but I think if he could be a similar build as a defenseman, right, where he's just a pure offensive guy, but he's so dynamic offensively that his defensive metrics don't really matter all that much. And his defense last year wasn't actually that bad. Like, it was fairly league average-ish. And if he can do that forever, like, you got a ton of value in what Denton Matejchuk can bring to your team. And that's huge for the Blue Jackets here, and he definitely looks like somebody that I'm super excited to see play a full-time NHL role, hopefully besides somebody who can actually help him hit that ceiling. Maybe of Dante Fabro. I don't know. I love Dante Fabro too. And again, like, an astonishing player to get for where they did. I mean, the Predators moving off of Fabro just was so strange. I didn't understand that. But somebody who's a great two-way defenseman, really good play driver, really good at suppressing chances defensively. His penalty kill numbers are really good. He finishes at a decently high level. He plays against pretty strong competition too. He's somebody who's been on an upward trajectory for the last 3 seasons. He's going to his age 27 season. He only has, he has, some room to continue to develop here as a top 4 defenseman. Ideally, he's probably a second pair guy, but I think his ability to play both ends of the ice pretty strongly against decent competition makes me feel like he can take on a first pair role if he has to. And I think, as this team continues to push for a playoff spot, maybe he's somebody we see leapfrog, an Ivan Provorov for those high-end minutes on this team besides Zach Werenski. If not, I think he's perfect to play with Denton Matejchuk. I think he matches Matejchuk's ability, especially on the defensive side, really, really well, and he fits kind of the ability to create offense too, and he can kind of feed on that with Matejchuk if that's the plan they decide to go with. But I think, regardless, Fabro is somebody you can kind of throw all the way around this lineup and get a ton of value out of. So, again, he's somebody that I've loved for a while. He took a step back up defensively after, a down year last year, but, offensively he's been on a pretty positive trajectory, and his overall value has been on a positive trajectory as well. So I have no reason to believe that that's going to stop, especially if they give him a bigger role. And finally, we get to Ivan Provorov, who, like I said, like, I don't think Provorov's bad. Right, I don't think Provorov is a bad defenseman, but I think he's overrated. I think that the minute munching that he does inflates his value, right? Like, people look at the time on ice, and they're like, oh, well, he plays a ton, so he must be really good. And clearly, that's what his agent thought, and the Blue Jackets thought when they paid him, the insane money that they did. I think that, one, you could have opened that slot up to another young player that's moving up. Like, the Jackets have, a ton of really intriguing prospects on the blue line. You could have also, just signed a cheaper defenseman to play a lower role, because you have guys like Severson and Fabro who can play on the top line. And you kind of have your top 6 already built there, right? Like, you could run, a top 4 of, Rowinski, Severson, Fabro, and then hopefully Matejchuk. And then just go get a third pairing defenseman who might be able to jump up as your 4 in case Matejchuk needs more time. And you would have saved yourself a ton of money. Like, that just seems like the more optimal plan. And, a lot of cases here, like, I'll try not to rip on teams for making moves that I disagreed in free agency if there wasn't an alternative. But the alternative here was so obvious. Like, I thought anyway, right? Like, you make the move of, letting Provorov walk, and obviously they wanted to replace him with Noah Dobson. That was kind of the thing, and the deal didn't work out. But you let Provorov rock. You run, Rowinski, Severson, and Fabro. Now, David Severson is getting older, but as your third defenseman, right? Like, Fabro's still young enough, and Zach Werenski is still, like, an absolute beast. you can make that work, and you can get like a 4 or 5 defenseman in free agency, which there was quite a few of. And then you have Matejchuk, and ideally you sign a 6-2, and you don't play Eric Branson either. And that's kind of the team that you build. And it seemed like a completely unnecessary move to bring back Provorov, and especially that cap hit. It really didn't make a ton of sense to me. Provorov, he's fine in a bunch of areas. There's nothing in his game that really strikes out to me. But he's just kind of fine everywhere, right? Like he's either mediocre or slightly above or below mediocre in most things that he does. He just plays a lot, right? He has the endurance factor, and teams really salivate over that. And you see the good GMs and the good teams not really doing that, right? Like if the first thing that you have to say about a defenseman is that he can play 25 plus minutes a night, he's probably not very good, right? Like if that's the first thing that jumps off the page to you. And it was the same thing with Seth Jones in Columbus too, right? Where the biggest narrative around him and the biggest thing that people pointed to was, oh my god, this guy plays close to half the game every night. It's like, okay, so what? And I just, that seems to be kind of the narrative around Provorov, especially with this contract. And that's that's very worrying to me. Like as somebody who, thinks that I watch a pretty good amount of hockey, if I really like a player, I'm able to, point out reasons why. And saying that a player plays a lot isn't one of those reasons, right? Like if you, I'll give you an analogy, right? Like if you're talking about a wide receiver in the NFL and you're like, oh, this guy played 99% of snaps for his team, he's really good. So what, right? Like he might have had 2 catches a game. That doesn't mean that he's good. It just means that he has, he can run a lot. And that worries me with Provorov, and he's not somebody that I would have paid anywhere near that contract, and I would have let walk. And I think that there's a really easy out for him to walk, and the Blue Jackets defense would look just as good as it does now. Looking at the goalies here, like I said in the intro, like Elvis Merzlikins seems like his time is kind of up as the starter. I still have him listed as the starter just because of like the extreme low amount of games that Jet Greaves has played. And that's what worries me here, because I like Jet Greaves is the option to be the number 1 guy at the end of this year, right? Like by the end of the season, if all goes well, Jet Greaves has a solid season and is the starter, plays 45, 50 plus games, and looks like a true number 1 goalie in the NHL, or at least like is starting to show the promise of being a true number 1 goalie in the NHL. But there's a very good reality that doesn't happen, right? Like in the last 2 seasons, Jet Greaves has played 20 games. Now, he has a 92% save percentage and a 94%, Fenwick save percentage, and has 19.74 goals saved above expected. That's basically one, goals saved above expected per game. Like he is saving an additional goal every game that he plays. But he's only played 20 games. And it's such a small... Now, goalies are so strange that like a goalie could just break out and have a great season anyway. But it's such an astronomically small sample size over the course of multiple seasons. And he's looked good in every stint that he's had, right? Like he looked really good 2 years ago. He looked really good last year. But 20 games are just so small for me to fully commit to Jet Greaves being the starter and just fully committing to that. Elvis Merzlikins is fine as a backup, right? Like I don't think his numbers are that crazy. Like an 894 save percentage is fine. Almost 1 goal saved above expected over 94 games is pretty bad, but he's doing what he needs to. But like what that tells me is that like he's saving the shots that he should save. And for a backup goalie, you really can't ask for more than that. Like it's hard to, especially when you're not like a Stanley Cup contender. And even if you're a Stanley Cup contender, unless you're running a tandem, you probably have, a true starting goalie anyway. So, like at this point, right, like if Connor Hellebuyck's not playing up to par, the Jets aren't winning a cup anyway. So it doesn't really matter how good the backup is, right? So Elvis Merzlikins, being net neutral in terms of when he plays. It's fine as long as the defense doesn't allow a ton of chances against. Then you're fine. I need to see Jet Greaves play like double the amount of games that he's played so far, right? Like I think he needs to play like 40 games this year for me to believe that he's this great goalie. And it does kind of worry me that this guy who's put up this many this great number, like these great numbers, has only played 20 games over the last 2 seasons, right? Like you'd think that a guy who's putting up these fantastic numbers would get more opportunity, and he hasn't. And I don't know why. Like there has to be something there that Columbus has seen that we're not, as to why he's not getting those minutes. And he should this year. I hope he does, because I think he's super fun. I love Jet Greaves. He had an awesome run at the end of last year too. Just play him. Like just let him play, and let's see what you have, because what we've seen so far has been phenomenal, and has me very excited for what he can be. But you just need to play him. And that's kind of my whole thing. So as of now, I have him listed as the backup, but I absolutely think that he'll be the starter. And I have him rated kind of low because, again, we just haven't seen him play. So I need more than 20 games to go higher than a 77 overall. I think that's kind of fair. But again, I love Jet Greaves. I think he's awesome. I think that he has insane potential. His numbers have been phenomenal. But he's only played 20 games. I don't know what else to say. In terms of the special teams, again, I think there's potential here for some progression. I really don't know how much I believe in them, wholeheartedly as of now, but I do think that there's again there's opportunity for this unit to improve, but I just need to see it, right? I need to see that happen before I can fully commit to loving the construction of this roster. So it's fine. I mean, I have them rated pretty low going into this season, but I don't think that they're going to be the 30th special teams unit in the league. But again, they weren't great last year, and they really didn't do anything to improve either unit this year. So you're just kind of hoping that people can continue to take steps forward. So there you go. That is team number 22 on my power rankings, the Columbus Blue Jackets. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Make sure you comment what you think of the Blue Jackets down below. I think they're a really fascinating team. I think they have a lot of really good potential players, but it's just hoping to see that they pop. And hopefully that kind of came across in this video. But if you liked it, leave a like. Make sure you subscribe so you catch the other 21 videos that we're doing. We will cover your team at some point during the summer before the start of the season. But yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you for team number 21 in a couple days.